Hi, thank you guys for joining in. My name is Chef Kimberly Brock-Brown, Southeast Regional Vice President, ACF. And today we are highlighting um, our 5 panelists, and the discussion is going to be on implicit bias and systemic racism. It's a topic that, of course, is being discussed today nationwide, actually worldwide, and it's just something we thought we could do to aid and insist and give educational information to those who need it and want it, and how to move along, how to get better. And so I'm going to introduce my panel to you. First off is Professor Jessie Yearwood, a full-time faculty member in the Food and Hospitality Institute of El Central College in Dallas, Texas. She completed both her Master's of Science in Dietetics and Institutional Administration and Master's degree in Nutrition at Texas Women's University. In her 20-year tenure as full-time faculty, she served as program coordinator, president of the El Centro College Faculty Association, and member of the Dallas County Community College District Faculty Council. She has also served as culinary instructor and child nutrition program specialist for the Dallas Independent School District. Her interests and passions lie in advocacy and employing her gifts and training to encourage and mentor others to achieve their best as individuals and professionals. She believes that each person is uniquely gifted for a greater purpose. Welcome, Professor Jessie Yearwood.
Thank you. It's my privilege to be here.
Chef Ashten Garrett, born and raised in Akron, Ohio. Ashten Garrett began his professional culinary career when he was 16 years old, washing dishes in a high-end fine dining restaurant. After graduating high school, Ashten was selected to be on the opening executive board of the ACF's Young Chefs Club. He served for 2 years at the very first ACF Young Chefs Club Eastern Regional Vice President before accepting his current role as an ACF Young Chefs Club ambassador. Ashten attended Johnson Wales University in North Miami, Florida, where he attained an associate's degree in culinary arts and a bachelor's degree in hospitality and food service management. He then traveled to Italy, Spain, and France, cultivating his palate and culinary techniques while creating innovative and entrancing dishes. Ashten has been recognized for his multiple culinary and hospitality achievements in various organizations, including the James Beard Foundation and the American Culinary Federation. His most notable accomplishment includes winning a Food Network's Guys Grocery Games in 2020. Currently residing in Cleveland, Ohio, working at the Marriott International at Key Tower, Ashten finds great pleasure in creating wonderful culinary dishes for others to enjoy. Welcome, Ashten.
Thank you, Chef. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Next up, Lee H. Moultrie II. Food and beverage career started in summer of 1992 when he was 16 years old as a busboy in downtown Charleston, South Carolina, until 1977. He is a U.S. Air Force Desert Storm veteran, retired August 1994. While in the Air Force, Mr. Moultrie worked briefly as a shore cook in the Officers Club in Mildenhall, England, before finding his niche in logistics management. From 2001 to 2008, Mr. Moultrie worked as a consultant on various projects at the Medical University of South Carolina, MUSC, University of South Carolina, USC, along with other nonprofit and community-based organizations, helping to bridge the gap as a liaison in health issues between doctors, MDs, and PhDs and the community. Mr. Moultrie is a civil rights activist, the winning lead plaintiff on a lawsuit that ended up at the U.S. Supreme Court in 2004 for the voting disenfranchisement of the African American community from 1963 to 2004. Certified communicator in Toastmasters from 2008 to present, and from 2016 till now, associated with Steve Palmer and Mickey Bass as event friends to offer support for individuals working through their recovery, alcohol, or drugs in the food and beverage community, as he did in 1988. Welcome, Lee H. Moultrie.
Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you. Dr. Stephen McLeod-Bryant was born and raised in Binghamton, New York. He attended the University of Rochester, receiving a BA in cybernetics and then receiving his MD there in 1984. He completed his residency in psychiatry at Tufts New England Medical Center in Boston, Mass. After finishing his residency in 1988, he became a faculty member of the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences, Medical University of South Carolina, MUSC. He has previously been medical director for the South Carolina Department of Mental Health. He is past vice chair for clinical affairs in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at MUSC and medical director of Charleston Memorial Hospital. After 24 years at MUSC, he left Charleston to join Meharry Medical College's Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. He was vice chair and then interim chair of the department. In 2015, he left Meharry and joined the University of Miami's Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences and is currently clinical associate professor. He was recently appointed to the Dean's Task Force on Structural Racism. Welcome, Dr. McLeod-Bryant.
Thank you, Chef Tim, for this opportunity to share and learn.
Thank you. Okay, so speaking of sharing and learning, topics today, as I said earlier, implicit bias. What is it? Well, I looked it up on Wikipedia. Unconscious bias or implicit stereotypes is the unconscious attribution of particular qualities by an individual to a member of some social outgroup. Implicit biases, however, are associations learned through past experiences. Implicit bias can be activated by the environment and operate outside of a person's intentional conscious cognition. What is systemic racism? Racism is a form that is embedded in a normal practice within society or an organization. It can lead to such issues as discrimination in criminal justice, employment, housing, healthcare, political power, and education, among other issues. The collective failure of an organization to provide an appropriate and professional service to people of color, to people because of their color, culture, or ethnic origin. It can be seen or detected in processes, attitude, and behavior that amount to discrimination through prejudice, ignorance, and thoughtlessness, and racist stereotypes while disadvantaging minority ethnic groups. So an example that I thought of that happened to me, one of them would be implicit bias off the top. I think I actually wrote about it in my book when I was still in my apprenticeship program in Dallas. One of the chefs asked the question if what my plans were when I graduated. Did I plan to get married, have babies right away? And I was like 20, 21-ish, I think, when it happened. And I was taken aback and struck at that time by the question. And I answered it quickly. No, I hadn't any plans to get married and didn't have any babies, coming or anything like that. I want to be single and get my career going. But my also process and thought was, did he ask the guys the same question who were in the apprenticeship program with me at the time, or coming behind me? And so, that struck me as wrong. But also mindful that that's a supervisor, that's a boss, and a good guy taught me a lot. And I just had to think about, how that affected me and other people maybe coming before me. So any other questions, comments anybody has for their examples of maybe what implicit bias or systemic racism might be for them? Ashten?
Sure. Well, for me, I've been actually very fortunate to not have received a lot of implicit bias in the workplace and or in school. But for some of my colleagues, they've kind of, conveyed various racial and implicit biases towards them. I can think of one, a blatant example, a colleague of mine. She was at a work convention and was there on a group. And one of the program leaders came up to her and said, oh, your ideas aren't really deemed sufficient enough because we think that they're going to be revolved around soul food. Knowing that she had an extensive background in actually culinary arts in different cuisines and traditions that afforded her the opportunity to cook, whether it's international or, being domestic. And she just came on the phone and was just really crying to me, really just asking myself, how could they say this? Like what would give them any indication that I would, only know a certain type of cuisine. So that struck me and really just how motivated she was to make sure that this wasn't her, indication towards culinary arts, and she just wanted to, turn the tide and really just bring awareness to people that, although we are a certain color, we're much more than that, and food does not discriminate. It knows no discrimination. It doesn't know any gender, any, race, ethnicity, or anything like that. So for her to tell me that really put, something in my heart and really ignited me to become a better chef.
That's awesome. Awesome. Jessie, how do you think it affects, what have you seen, I think, as a professor, as an educator in culinary arts?
I think what I've seen, I can speak personally to one experience I had, or several actually, where, for instance, I remember my first class ever in college as a professor, where when I walked into the room, the students did not know that I was Black because my name by nature, Taylor Yearwood together, suggests that I am something other than the color of my skin, which I am, something other than the color of my skin. But two students got up and left and never returned the semester. And that was not my first time experiencing something like that, because I remember walking on a college campus as a freshman, or sophomore, I think it was, and asking someone, could they direct me to a particular place on the campus? And the person stopped, looked at me, their mouth fell wide open and said, "Oh my God, you speak English." And you know, so the thing about implicit bias is that the person really oftentimes lacks awareness of that they're feeling this way. And so when they see you, it brings out in them this response. It's the woman I'm walking down the street in New York City, and she doesn't see me, and she looks up and she sees me, and she's holding her purse very loosely. And immediately as she sees me coming, she hangs onto her purse as though it were a lifeboat or something. And as she walked towards me, and I simply smiled and said, "Good morning, how are you today?" Right? So it is, or in my neighborhood, I was out walking one morning, and a young woman was coming towards me. I was going east and she was coming west. And she had a stick in her hand. And as she looked up and saw me, she had the stick, she held her stick in a defensive posture. And as I came towards her, I said, "Good morning, how are you? You're getting your walk in this morning," which of course was what I was doing. And so you see that. As a professional, though, I think you see it more than anything in how your ideas might be disregarded, or your contributions might be disregarded, or somebody might actually say something in a room where you are the only minority, and they'll say something like, "Some people just need to leave," and they'll look directly at you. And so I think that oftentimes people are not aware that what their heart is saying is showing up in their actions.
Wow. So Steve, what do you think about all that so far?
So, you know, one of the things that may be going through viewers' minds is, as you're listening to these examples, is, well, you know, I understand that you felt this way, but, you know, perhaps you're being a little too sensitive. You know, the woman clutching her purse, you know, she just might have been just trying to grab it just because she felt it was slipping away, or you know, these situations of feeling slighted. You're just being too sensitive, too sensitive. The whole notion about implicit bias is that it's an attempt by scientists, psychologists, to try to explain not so much the actions per se, but how the sort of the mechanism behind the actions that leads to decisions that get made that slight Black and brown people. We know that, and I'm assuming that in the Culinary Federation, that the membership is underrepresented with Black and brown people, women and men of color. And the question comes up, well, why is that? Why are Black and brown chefs underrepresented within the Federation? And it's going back to situations like this that's been described by Jessie and Ashten, trying to draw a connection between these behaviors, which many of us of Black and brown skin have witnessed and shared amongst each others as we've dealt with the majority culture, and trying to understand, because most people, when approached about why did you do this, why did you say this, or why did you pull your purse tight, most folks will say, I wasn't meaning anything by it. I didn't mean to offend you. And that's where this notion of implicit biases is come about, to try to understand that. But the question then remains, why are different decisions being made about Black and brown people that lead to inequities in whether they're a membership of the Federation, or whether they're being incarcerated, or whether they're being impoverished, and so forth?
So I talk to different people all the time, and I have people of color who, start their own associations because they feel left out, or because they want to see more people of color when they are socializing and networking and working alongside of. So what can be done, you think, to be more inclusive? What is something that we could say or show? What's the behavior? I think, what does that look like to show and say that we are, and we want to be inclusive? We want everybody to be successful and network, take advantage of all the programs that we have. I mean, how do you get that message out?
Who's that to?
Well, you can start, and then the doctor can go next.
Okay, I come from a unique place because of me working in food and beverage, the front side of the house since 1972, and interacting with you guys in the back side of the house, and being associated with Chef Kimberly for the past 10, 15 years, 10, 12 years, something like that. But it's making sure, as I'm on the ACF website right now, making sure that individuals going through the culinary school, as we have here in Charleston, Trident Technical School, helping back and forth understand the importance, the relevance of ACF, getting that word out to chefs of the world, because anyone can call themselves a chef. But how do we help people, especially people of color, understand the value that certification, that designation of ACF brings to the table for them, and helping them in their career track? How do we do that?
Yeah, Professor Taylor, I was going to say, Jessie.
Yeah, I think what we have to do is begin when people are younger, and have mentorship programs, have the leadership and members of the ACF begin to search out and mentor, or offer to mentor the minority population of people in the culinary field, so that you pull them in. It is very difficult to get people to join something they don't think they belong to, or feel a part of, or feel that they're welcomed to that place. I can speak for myself. Until you feel that the door is open to you, then you are forced to push it down. And then what happens when you push the door down, then people begin to think that you are obnoxious, and you are loud, and you are angry, and you're all kinds of things. I think what the ACF can do is begin to show on their website. I haven't looked at the website in the last couple of days. Look at their website and see, do we represent the overall broad society of people serving in the culinary field? That's for starters. Reaching out to have when there are conferences that are held, ensure that scholarships might be available to people who would otherwise not come to the convention. Making an effort to ensure that the people who are there go back with the message that this is an organization that is open and welcome. And I think Ashten can probably speak to this as a young person who is representing the ACF and some of the challenges that he might be hearing from his young members or his young colleagues.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you alluded to, really just the mentorship is huge, especially as young chefs of color. Seeing somebody in our position or in our future position is big for us. You know, we're visual people as young chefs. You know, we want to see people doing it in the industry, as, you know, Chef Kim or many of my mentors, you know, who are, you know, people that I aspire to become. You know, I idolize them. So having these readily accessible mentors and also just scholarships and grants, I think what the ACF is moving towards and providing more access and more resources towards is equal access for opportunity. You know, allowing students that might be in inner city environments to have the same opportunities as those that are attending private institutions. And allowing them to really just get the full grasp of, you know, what culinary arts is. Again, like I said, you know, food knows no discrimination, no gender, anything like that. So allowing the students to really have access, you know, some of my colleagues to have access to these opportunities is great. I think as we are the future of this, you know, the culinary and the hospitality industry, you know, we need to be groomed by, you know, these tremendous mentors. And I'm sure the ACF has tremendous, as I've met some, whether it's been at, you know, online webinars such as this or in conventions. So I do think that is very important for mentorship.
I think Jessie and Ashten are touching on something important in terms of in thinking about what the ACF or what any of us could do to deal with structural racism, and that is to identify those policies or procedures or products, if you will, within the organization that could be changed or offered to deal with some of these inequities, things like scholarships or grants, or when you start saying, you know, reaching the inner city, or, you know, how can the organization change its structure or the way that it does its meetings or its conferences or its outreach, its technology and so forth, to address the gaps that are there in different communities. And that's how you change the structure that has led to the inequities that we see today.
Yeah, we had an email from a young educator, African American, and the one thing he was saying was maybe we should talk more and go visit more HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, to do talking to their, especially ones that had culinary programs. You know, why we can't talk to them, tell them about the program, give them more information, and invite them to it. There's got to be a local chapter in the area wherever the school is. And so between the chapter and ACF, I think national reaching out, I think, to that HBCU, I think that would be a win-win for a lot. You know, and I also believe since we're in COVID and everything, and we are online a lot more, especially our national convention for the first time, that kind of levels the playing field a little bit more, because it's less expensive to do online than to be in person. So it might be a little bit more affordable, you know, than going to the actual convention itself. You don't get so much so the networking part of it as much, but at least you would get the education part, and that's key. So I always tell everybody education is key, and certification, you know, sets you apart on a different level. But not, I mean, of course there are other groups out there that are social or who get together and have other opportunities to network with each other. But, you know, I think the certification part, you know, it makes you designated as a professional, somebody who's learned and is current, because you have to keep current on nutrition and sanitation and all that stuff, especially now when sanitation is so key. You know, how we can become more inclusive. You know, when you got to see body. You know, it's funny to me because mentoring wasn't even a word that I was familiar with when I was in culinary school, apprenticeship program. It just wasn't. And so I've realized over the years of going to ACF events that as I've gotten older, you know, that I'm the one people are talking to and looking for mentorship and all that. And you know, it just wasn't done when I was in school. You know, I didn't know who that person was for me. I couldn't have identified her or him. I think I had one African American chef, a sous chef at the hotel when I was working at the time, but otherwise I never saw that person. I don't know who that is. So I understand it's key, but if you're driven, you're driven. If you're gonna see it, you're gonna see it. You're gonna do it.
One of the things, as Steve and I, well, as a number of us operate within the university level, So when I'm sitting at the university level, I'm talking to the folks about the diversity. And you have Black History Month, and you celebrate Cinco de Mayo Day. But what about these other professionals who are from Bangladesh, Belize, the Philippines, and so on and so forth? Are you celebrating the diversity there on the website? And then the diversity comes in also with people who are physically disabled in one way or another. So when we're looking at all of these structural changes that you're discussing, all of that is a part of the diversity and becoming more inclusive as an organization.
Oh, true. Well, we have a task force, diversity and inclusion, which I, as a board member, am in the liaison for. So we do have that for LGBTQ, for age, for all that. So that is in place. Now, how active they are and what they're doing, that could be better. I agree with that. That definitely could be better. I mean, but diversity, like I said, is so inclusive of so many things, but just to narrow and hone it down on what's happening in our society right now, when people don't know what to say, how to say it, or is this going to be politically correct when I say this like this, and I have a kitchen. I've had this conversation. I've got a kitchen full of Black women, and I don't know how to speak to them. I don't want to offend them. I don't want to come off as I'm being, talking down to them. So how do I speak to them? Like, well, speak to them, But I've had chefs talk to me that way. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to react. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to be coming off as, greater than or better than, whatever. But, how do we get along and how do we move forward in conversations so everybody's, comfortable with being in a diverse kitchen? I mean, culinary arts is one of the most diverse industries there are. I mean, we come from everywhere, and women, people of color. I mean, every time I've taught a class at whatever school, it's always been more women in the classes. But then getting into the arena, it flips. Women are the worker bees more so than the men. And so how do we just that? It's people of color and women. How do we go from this part to this part? How do we get that level playing field?
I think one through policies, right? So we have policies and structures in place that allows for all individuals to be involved in the industry. That's first and primary. Secondly, an acknowledgement of people's skills and talents and abilities. And again, I can't stress enough the whole idea of mentoring, coaching, and advocating for those individuals. So if I have a woman who is a strong chef on my team, and I need a leader in my kitchen, I don't first ask her if she's going to have a bunch of babies, because that's inappropriate. What I do is I give her the opportunity first, right? And through mentoring and coaching, bring her to the level that she needs to be effective in terms of this, or any other minority group for that matter. I think that we start there, and I think from the standpoint of the ACF or any other organization, we begin to look at and coach individuals, in the minority groups, to invite them to the leadership suite. Right, I think Ashten mentioned the fact that young people are actually looking for examples of people who look like them, right, in that role, someone they can follow and emulate. And I think that is kind of where it begins. So the organizational structure needs to be inclusive, right, first and primary, and secondly, allow for the individuals in those groups to ascend into areas of prominence, leadership, and influence.
And as Chef Kimberly, as you asked, what do we do? A part of that also is on the national scene, a lot of people, including myself, we're reading different books to help us bridge that gap on which we didn't understand before. If we're talking about white guys and even African Americans or people of color, we are looking at the book White Fragility, whereas into the fact we are learning some things and dismantling some barriers that we had up there before. Are we looking at another book is How to Be an Anti-Racist? Again, whereas into the fact we are learning how to communicate with other individuals where we may not have been as receptive before. Now is fertile ground that we can move forward collectively.
Right, and those books and others are in the links that when people registered can go look at that and some other videos, you know, to help along with the process. So you're right. I do believe in giving tools and information. So, you know, whatever you don't get from this, you can always go and, you know, educate yourself. And, you know, I'm reading my book and how to be, you know, how to be better, you know, how to be a better human being. You know, we're all human beings. So how do we learn to be human beings together? I think is the key part. You know, what can we do to be better in our work environments, in our home environments, whatever, just better people.
Because
since you know, on Dr. Kendi's book, you know, going back to the question that you asked earlier, Kim, you know, what does the chef do who's got a kitchen full of Black women? The first thing that, you know, that he or she realizes is that they all may be Black, they all may be women, but they're not all the same. And you got to start talking with one at least, and get to know them and begin to communicate. When we talk about, you know, the structural racism, one of the things that keeps the structure in place are beliefs and ideas that say all these people are this, or all those people are that. And when we begin to realize that, yeah, we may share a certain history, we may share a certain culture and whatnot, but we're all individuals, and you know, we're not going to break this thing down if we keep this sort of group think about those people, or, you know, those ones over there that we don't think are as good as us.
I agree. That's good.
And one thing that Dr. Kende spoke about in How to Be an Anti-Racist, he brings out the fact that sometimes whites are more concerned in thinking they are going to lose something versus when we're looking at a more inclusive society that all of us are gaining.
I agree. So how does the industry move to equity? I mean, it's 2020. We're halfway through the year for the most part, and so what's different now than, say, you know, a year ago? How do we move forward? How do we progress in the midst of everything that's going on? Ashton, what do you think?
I definitely think recognition, or you know, realizing that, you know, this is the turning point. You know, I think a lot of companies have actually started to realize and implement different programs and initiatives to be more diversified and inclusive. And I also think it's becoming a turning point for young people. You know, as you know, we're socially driven, whether it's on our phone or it's virtual or person to person, whatever the case may be. You know, we want to be in the scene. Oftentimes, we don't know how to start though. And that's where mentorship, you know, really comes along. It's like, okay, you know, following in somebody else's footsteps, basically taking our hand and leading us, and then allowing us to branch off that and do our own thing. So I think the industry is really coming together. I think, you know, we're a long ways out, but still recognizing and realizing that there is a problem that needs to be fixed.
Okay.
I think also that we shouldn't be afraid to try, because I think that sometimes we do nothing because we don't want to try. I think Dr. Bryant mentioned the fact that you talk to the woman, you talk to one. It may be uncomfortable, but you talk to one, and then you begin to ask questions of the other, and be willing to say, I don't know. Be willing to say, can you tell me what you think? How do you want me to communicate with you? Can we have, because it's going to be uncomfortable. And it's going to be very, very, very challenging. And I think it was Rosa Parks who actually said, to bring about change, you must not be afraid to take the first step. It's that first step going forward. And I agree with my colleague who earlier said that when we don't change, or when we don't move towards change, so that is inclusive of the society, what we do is we hurt the entire society, because what happens is the gifts, talents, and blessings that that person would bring to society is lost. Right? That's one. And then secondly, what I think we do when that happens is that individual does not get to blossom, grow, and develop and become something great for themselves, but also to leave a legacy for their families and their children. And so I think we are missing, we're robbing people of their humanity when we don't do those things that enable them to be better than they ever believed they could be. Because the reason for a lot of times that people don't believe they can be better is that they don't have an example of how to become better.
I agree. I remember when I lived in Dallas and I was going to school, and one of my favorite Italian restaurants, the old school with the grapes and the stuff hanging down from the ceiling and stuff, it had an open kitchen, but the kitchen was full of Hispanic people, Mexican workers. And, that's not strange in Dallas, but for my head, it was strange for me to see all the Mexicans in the kitchen cooking Italian and good Italian food. It just never like, oh, that was my awakening, right? Because like, wow, there's some good pasta, from these Mexican people. Like, oh, okay, duh. So, I mean, we all have it, but what we think, who should be cooking what? Like I said, Black people cook more than fried chicken. So don't just call the Black chef in February to talk about fried chicken. Call that Black chef in December and talk about the Christmas meal, or call it whatever. It's not just, we're not seasonal. Should be stymied or pigeonholed into one specific area of expertise, right? Because most of us are trained. We've been through a culinary school program or something, so we should cook, we should bake or whatever. And so how do you, I think, what else do we do besides communication is key? How else can we get the mentorship thing going? I mean, is it just on the educator to start mentoring or identifying people in their classrooms? Or is it, say, an ACF chapter to go out and maybe solicit more young people from the schools, whatever, around? I mean, what do you think the best course of action might be?
Well, here in Charleston, every Wednesday in the local newspaper is the food section. So then I would think the ACF chapter here, it would be the ACF chapter here, would look and see who's doing whatever in the food arena, and or reach out to the editor of the who does the most of the writings for the food section, and say, how do we connect with this chef? I mean, there was an article 2 weeks ago in reference to this guy that did a Black Food Friday, making sure that you go into an African-American restaurant every Friday. So what did I do? I called the guy up. Why? I knew someone that knew him. I said, connect me to this guy and let me see how I can assist him achieving his ultimate goal. So I would think that the ACF chapter that's here in Charleston or in any city could do the same thing with their food arena. Let me see if this chef that's preparing this great meal, food truck or whatever, is he or she a part of the ACF? If not, how can we help him or her achieve that goal and being a part of our network?
Chef, one thing we did while I was in school, to gain more, I guess, education for young chefs, was we went to certain events that we knew the students would go to, whether it's a concert, to a park, or just to a family gathering, what have you. I really just show them that there are different avenues out there besides certain, like you said, like pigeonholed in certain industries. That some of the young students felt that they were that was their classification, that was going to be in. And when they saw actually chefs that looked like them cooking and doing something interesting, it ignited their brain and imagination and creativity. So I think as ACF chapters, if you can't get them to come to your chapter, in terms to mentor them, seek out different events that might be happening, whether it's at a school or, in a certain event, or it's a celebration or a party, things like that, and just, go out there and show them that there are different avenues.
So in addition to, like, say, FCCLA or Pro Start, what's the other one? Pro Start. Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
How else, those are culinarians, right? Because it's a cooking competition, right, on the high school level. So that would be key. I mean, I know a lot of ACF people are judging those competitions, and we're there.
Exactly.
We've even partnered, I think, a little bit with some of them. So things like that, or I mean, even on the high school level, going to, back in my day, it's home ec, but now going to the culinary arts program in high school, and I think being available and talking to them, and I think using your network yourself. I mean, who goes to everything everywhere but a sales rep or purveyor, right? Those people are everywhere in everybody's kitchen, be it at the school, the hospital, the country club, whatever. I think giving them information so that they can happily pass it out and leave it with that chef or whatever, or the educator, whoever it is, to say, hey, we have a meeting, hey, we're having an event, we got a Zoom coming up or something, and to make it more inclusive and invite somebody, because if they don't know, they don't know, so how do you get the word out, I think. And I think utilizing that network of sales reps may be a little hard at this point in time, because of our lockdowns and stuff, but I think that's a really good way to start to get to know and get to be where people are that you want to see and meet.
One of the things we do here in Dallas is when there are big culinary events in the city, we pair students up with the particular chefs that are coming in, so that they can go out, and what I encourage my students to do in my external learning class is actually to collect the chef's business card or information. And as soon as that event gets finished and you're back home, maybe the next morning, that you actually write a note to the chef saying thank you and what you have learned from them. And that kind of stuff. What would be interesting as to whether or not the chef in return reaches out to that student and says, if you ever need anything, please reach out to me, or you need a mentor or a coach, or identifying a skill that young person did really well. You were wonderful at customer service, or your nice skill, or impeccable, or however they say that, to make sure those young people feel that they have got the skill. In the minority community, and I think we've heard more and more of this, is the absence of encouragers. The dads are incarcerated at large numbers. And so a young man who is struggling to find his career and to find himself, coming alongside him and saying, let me show you the way, right? Or that young woman who is struggling in an all-male kitchen and who wants to have a conversation with a female chef about, how did you make it through this? What do you suggest, right? Those are some of the things that we can do as individuals. And on the whole issue of the makeup of our kitchens, right? You mentioned earlier the Hispanic kitchen or the Italian kitchen that is filled with Hispanic cooks, right? And usually they don't rise to the level of leadership. And so how does the industry then encourage the training and admonition of those individuals to move up into positions of great responsibility? I think what COVID-19 has taught us is the importance of those individuals, because now, right, because we're talking about frontline workers, and in our kitchens, our frontline workers are the back of the house and the front of the house, right? It's the people,
central,
right? For sure. So I think somebody mentioned earlier, we're in the middle of 2020, and 2020 has been an enormous year for teaching the human being and drawing out what's best in us in terms of our compassion for each other. Hopefully, as we move forward, it also reminds us of that the people in the industry who do the lion's share of the work ought to be treated with respect and to be treated as important as the people in the C-suites.
Well, I agree. I agree. So we should change. And for those who are comfortable, or there's nothing wrong with my kitchen, you know, what's the why? Why should we change? You know, if going with the status quo is good enough for right now, we've been doing it all this time, then why should you change? Is everybody happy? I mean, why do we need to change?
I heard a discussion on NPR 2 days ago. There was a judge in some small town in Kentucky, and he posted on Facebook, everything is great with our town. It was a city council member. Everything is great in our town. We don't have those big problems like everybody else have. That's the national level. We don't do that in this town here. It came to the next city council meeting. Everyone came in there raising hell and saying, no, this happens here. So when you say the kitchen is okay and we're not doing anything, nothing is wrong, well, you never had an opportunity like you have now that everyone can come to the table with whatever ingredients they have to share. And how do we build up, like Jessie indicated, to bring all the gifts and talents, and we can build upon that individual's creativity that opportunity did not seem to exist for. And that's why you may want to do that and have that open door policy and that dialogue with as many people as possible to say, where can we do things a little differently? Do we have a box that somebody can drop some ideas in that box, and we can all sit around as a team and say, how do we move forward and bring some of these new ideas to the kitchen that we are operating in?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I know when I was running up my bake shop, I always likened my management style to I was more of a democratic pastry chef. I wanted ideas from everybody. Having been in a position where my ideas didn't count, didn't matter, you know, so I was very sensitive to that somebody was still in school versus the person who's been in the industry for years, who's in my shop. Everybody's got an idea and a thought. And so I like to get together all the ideas and put them together. And then as the leader, as the manager, knowing the buck stops with me, because if something goes wrong, it's me first, right? I take the best thing and I go forward with that one. And I think that same dynamic, what you're saying, is the same thing, that, you know, collectively getting people's ideas together, but having them feel comfortable to do it, I think, is key. So how do you get people to feel comfortable? You know, is the anonymous Dropbox, and then everybody can just pull, you know, the manager just pull something out and you discuss it? Or is there another way to get people comfortable enough to open up and say, hey, you know, when you said this last week, I felt like that, or when you don't let me, you know, work the middle line, and I always just have to work salads, or I always just do desserts when I'm on the line, you know, because the girls don't belong on the line. I've heard that too growing up, right? Women can't handle this, and that. It's the men, or, you know, how come we don't see more black leaders? You don't have any black chefs in here. There's no black. All the black people in the kitchen are always just the cooks, but there's no black leadership in the kitchen. How do we get people to feel comfortable enough to open up, and the people also to be, I guess, receptive to hear it?
Yeah, I would think that's critically important, that in the example that you just gave of the, you know, the kitchen is just fine, our kitchen's working well, you know, there's nothing wrong here. You know, I would be concerned that the reason that, say, the chef or the manager is feeling things are fine is that perhaps the level of power is such that people don't feel comfortable sharing how they're actually feeling about what's going on, either within the kitchen or in the world in general. And you know, I would just suggest that, you know, if a person is not, you know, if they have people of color within the kitchen and they're not hearing concerns, that they, you know, approach them. And it's not necessarily that they're going to have concerns about that manager, that chef, or that kitchen, but at least to voice their feelings and thoughts about what's going on in the country and the community, how it's affecting them, and be a great opportunity to learn what's happening outside the kitchen that may be impacting ultimately what happens in the kitchen. And then my final point would be that, well, if things are really going so well in that kitchen, you need to go out and go to some other kitchens and share what you think is going right in your kitchen, and perhaps others could learn from what you've got going on in your kitchen.
Yeah, model that, write that down and model it and sell it, because you can, people need some help out there.
Well, that's when I'm sitting with Ben's friend, with Steve and Mickey Palmer. I'm hearing some of the different things that's going on in different kitchens, different restaurants, and so on and so forth. So you can help the guys with some feedback on resources that they're looking for also.
Yeah, I think it's James Baldwin that says that nothing that is faced, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced.
Yeah.
And so I think also when there is the assumption that everything is great where I am, it's because I haven't asked the question, and because I don't want to face the reality of what the answers might very well be. So the ostrich with the head in the sand, right, is probably doing his operation great a disservice by not asking the questions and not looking enough to see. And I think a lot of, with the implicit bias business, it's a lack of awareness. That I may actually be treating one employee very differently than I am the other. So I may be documenting one employee for something while the other employee gets away with it. And I have no idea that I am behaving in this way, right? And probably if I actually asked my employees, they would tell me, did you realize that I was late 15 minutes last week, and Susie was late 15 minutes this week. Last week you cussed me out, but this week you wanted to know how Susie was doing, right? And so we by nature, I think, become unaware of what we are doing until we ask the question of individuals. And those individuals must feel free to actually come to the table and freely express themselves. And I think it's, somebody said earlier, may have been you, Kim, about, the whole issue of when I speak, do you need to hear me? What I say and understand what I said. And if you don't understand what I said, how about repeating it to me, back to me? Am I hearing you to say that you think I treat employees in a discriminatory manner by virtue of their gender or color or whatever the issues are, right? Because until I ask the question, as a leader, I may not be aware.
True that, true.
And there's something else also I was just thinking, if you're not as comfortable communicating with the folks in your kitchen right now, you may have an African-American friend that's not in that kitchen that you can have a conversation with first and address some of the questions, concerns that you have, and then you're a little bit more prepared to have those conversations. Because I have conversations with, be it political folks, academic folks, civil rights, whatever, business arena, and then they're saying, okay, I didn't understand this, I didn't understand that. And I said, well, let me share from this perspective. And then once they have heard that, then it's, okay, now I'm more prepared to go have a conversation with this person or that person there. And they're just looking for clarity.
So Ashten, what else can we do to help if our drive at ACF is to fill the pipeline, as Joe would say, to if we know we're an aging group, if our average age is 55, how do we get younger people, and specifically people of color, more so besides the mentoring? Is there anything else that you can think of off the rip that would be a great way to encourage and grab membership, so that we're not just a good old boys club?
Right. I think, Chef Kim, there's more bringing opportunity, whatever that looks like, international scholarship, grant programs, mentorship programs, as we spoke about, but also opportunity, just to allow these executive leadership roles to come about. Again, like we are visual people as young people, we want to see these executive roles kind of with people that look like us. And as we alluded to earlier, the diversity is huge. And creating a work culture is also big, and also an organizational culture is also big. Especially for, my female colleagues, some of them that have reached out to me, and they are uncomfortable. They have been put in situations where they are, either intimidated or they just don't know how to ask certain questions. And what that does is becomes a spiral effect, or a domino effect where, they just jump out of the industry completely. And they don't, and now we have a lessened number of already, a stagnated number of people, particularly, minorities that aren't in this industry already. So I think just, again, equal opportunity and access, whenever that looks like, whether it's a social media post highlighting, a certain student that's, doing something great in his or her community, or, again, highlighting, in a newspaper or in a blog post. Again, as Miss Jessie said, that acknowledgement goes a long way, especially for younger chefs. When they see that they're doing well, they're going to be more inclined to do better things and continue that spiral effect. And also what that does, that brings in their friends and their other colleagues, because again, like we are, impactful people. We want to be encouraged. We want to be around circles that are doing well, especially in a diversified industry.
Chef Kim, I was curious, does the ACF have fellowships for members, so-called minority fellowships, where a minority member could sort of shadow a board member or participate on some national committee to learn how the organization works? I asked that from the point of view that I know in the American Psychiatric Association, which I am a member, when I was in training, I applied for a minority fellowship, and that fellowship was gave me membership for 2 years, and I was placed on a national committee with esteemed psychiatrists, and I sat in on the committee meetings and heard the debates and saw the politics and got mentorship, and then my network sort of exploded in that basic opportunity, and the APA has benefited to a certain extent in the number of Black and brown young psychiatrists who've been brought into the organization. And although we've been frustrated at times, and we're fighting structural racism there too, but that opportunity has really helped to engage us and help us to understand the structure that is the APA. So I just wonder if the ACF has a similar sort of opportunity.
I'm aware of one of our past presidents who did that, I think, during one of his terms, where he, I don't remember how the program went, but there was some kind of like a lottery or competition or something, and then one person was chosen. And so like during our convention, they got to go to convention and they shadowed him. And so business meeting, board meeting, receptions, all that, they were joined at the hip for the most part throughout the whole conventions. And I don't know how far before the convention or after the convention that mentoring worked. And Ashten, didn't the young chefs, weren't you guys kind of like, as far as the executive board, wasn't that president or something, vice presidents doing something with ACF on the national level too, or no?
Yes, we had that. We had different programs set forth for high school students and everything like that. So
you guys with the high school students, but you didn't go, the young chefs didn't go to the ACF board. That didn't meet, mentor like that though, right?
Are you talking about like while we're in a national convention?
Yeah, or even at the local, or even at your the regional. You guys weren't networked or mentoring with a national board person. You guys were going below to the high school level, right?
We did both. We had a national advisor. Yes, we had a national advisor. Yeah. Okay.
And is that still going on or no?
I think the actual board, the system of the board is no longer in place, but I think there is still a president. And as I'm an ambassador, we just have small, ambassadors in different regions.
Okay. So that would be one thing. I guess those ambassadors getting together and maybe reaching out to regional VPs or, depending on where they are. I mean, you've got, like I know right now, we got board members, like I said, secretaries in the Northeast, in addition to the VP. So it could be, you know, we split that all up and everybody just take one and it kind of filters down that way. You know, even if now, like I said, we're just doing, you know, webinars, or whatever, but since we're not traveling so much, that I think that would be huge. That would be key. I mean, I know when I was the changes, right? When I was a junior member, because we used to have separate junior members from the professional member, the grown folks, I did not want. They scared me. I was intimidated. I did not want to go to the chef's meeting, you know, because they were just weren't nice. You know, they were just, you know, that stoic face and everything. Like, they weren't very welcoming to us apprentices, right? So we were very happy to stick to ourselves. And it's not necessarily the case. Some people still feel that way. They don't feel welcome when they go, and that we need to work on and change. But since we don't have the junior membership anymore, how do we make those students feel welcome and invited to come, you know, and stay?
May I have a suggestion for this? Seeing that we are very much operating via the internet and all things are possible, I think, right? It might be time for the ACF to bring together a group of young minority individuals that are in the industry, and along with those who are in leadership in the ACF, for a webinar to talk, so they can talk about how they see the world, right? And how they see the industry. So the young chefs may actually say, when I envision myself 20 years from now, or what the association looks like 20 years from now, this is how I see it. And the older chefs may remember when they were in their 20s, right? And they had some ideas, or may not have had any ideas, about what they wanted their profession to be 30, 40 years from now. And so there is this conversation between the generations, discussing the profession and the dreams and aspirations of the young chefs, and probably asking questions such as, how is the association prepared to keep itself alive? Because if everybody in the association is older and the young people aren't joining, it's going to eventually die. And so the question is, how do they or we incorporate in the conversation everybody so that we come up with a plan of action going forward? And that is, I think, how mentorship and coaching and stuff begins.
And to add to that, how do the ACF incorporate robotics, artificial intelligence into the creations of your craft? Because since March of this year, we've been operating under a new mandate. So everything is, the majority of things are moving towards robotics, artificial intelligence. How does this impact the cooking arena? And how does this right here help the new chef, the mature chef, the restaurant, food trucks, everything? How does this do this? So that's another conversation you have to have also.
Sure. I mean, that's another systemic issue for sure right there. Definitely. So a call to action, what's next? So we talked about mentoring. We talked about getting people together, so maybe on the national board, and maybe identifying from the Young Chefs Club or different schools across the country, putting those together. Is there any other call to action? Anything else? What next we could do to help with eliminate or make people aware of their biases, get rid of institutionalized systemic racism? What's the best thing that we can do going forward? What's besides having the conversation? What's next?
But you said you gave a link with all of the different books that we discussed.
The link is there, along with some of the videos that I and you and people on the board on this panel have recommended
Okay.
about what systemic racism is. There's an animation for that. There's a book. The New York Times has top 10 books for talking about implicit bias and racism. Then their newest top 10. It was funny because their newest list for their top bestsellers, I think it was 10, 7 of them are relating to issues of racial injustices and discrimination. So it's a topic that's not going anywhere. People want to know. I mean,
Right.
7 out of 10 books are dealing with this topic we're talking about today. So call to action, read more about it.
Read more about it. You can also call Dr. Steve McLeod-Bryant for in sessions. He can do some consulting services for the ACF also.
I think in addition to that, there's the opportunity now that the conversation is open for it to be included in upcoming ACF conventions, for training chefs in how to navigate through this whole issue of how do we deal with implicit bias and racism in our kitchens. How do chefs then manage and lead in a way that encourages across the board the people who serve in their organizations? And outside of the chefs actually don't work for the ACF. They work for companies, and how do they then encourage the companies to come on board with making sure that they themselves are equitable? The companies they work for are equitable. That when policies and procedures and other rules come down, that they are not like our laws, identifying things that are done by a particular group, right? Either to exclude them or to overtly or covertly, for that matter, give priority to others, right? So that it's a very open, equitable system and stuff like that. And I think that for the most part, the association itself has a responsibility in how it runs itself and how it interfaces with the minorities that are coming, that are being trained to become chefs. That's one arena. In the second arena are the companies where these young people are employed, right? And what is fairness and equity in those situations? How do you convince your organization to mentor, train, and promote young people, all groups,
right.
And so that we don't end up my greatest fear is that we've had the discussion over and over again, and we don't end up 20 years from now having the same discourse, but that young people who are alive and in the industry right now can look back and say, in 2020, my life began to change because my employer, for the first time, recognized my gifts and my talents and my commitment to the organization that I've given myself to. And they've therefore awarded and compensated me in a manner that is fair and equitable. And I can then turn around and say to other young people behind me, by the way, it's no longer a quota system. It's now a system of equity and fairness.
Wonderful.
Ashton, last thoughts, call to action, what are you thinking?
Sure, I think introducing certification, and whether it's high school level or the collegiate level as well. As you, Chef, Chef Kim just said, certification is very important, and it's growing in importance as well. On top of education or your trade craft. So I think introducing that, certain of my colleagues were going through school, they had no idea what certain certifications were offered through ACF until they got into the workforce. So I think that as well. And then also what Ms. Jessie said in terms of having webinars or open forums with these executive leaders within the ACF, and really just giving our perspective to them, letting them know, like, okay, we might have same ideals, but just different ways in getting there. I mean, cooking, it has no straight line, no straight path. Some people may start tomorrow, some people started 10 years ago, but the objective is, to really just to bring something genuine about it. So I think, certifications and then having different forums and open opportunities for young chefs to really excel.
Okay. Lee, call to action, final thoughts, what's next?
I think people utilize the information that you provided on the link and understand this is uncomfortable for a lot of people in our society right now, and be willing to take that step. It is uncomfortable. A lot of people are not out here to beat a white person up because they say this wrong, they didn't do that right, and so on and so forth. Be comfortable, be prepared, be ready to have an honest dialogue with people. I think we all make this world better for our children and grandchildren, just having an honest dialogue. Utilize the information that Chef Kimberly has a link. Any way I can be of further assistance to you guys, let me know. I thank you, Chef Kimberly, for this opportunity to be with you today, and the others on the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, final thoughts? What next call to action? What do you think?
Yeah, let me take what Lee said, perhaps even a little bit further in terms of the use of the resources. You know, I hate to say this, I'm 62 years old, and I was born.
You're young, 62.
I'm 63.
So I'm a product of 62 years of American racism, and it wasn't until you know, having these dialogues and learning, more recent learning, that I recognized my own racism. The thoughts and ideas that I had about white people, brown people, my own people, that were in fact racist, and that I needed to sort of sit down and think about and examine, you know, what is my, you know, values, what is irrational about the way I'm thinking. And I think that's the sort of thing that I hope that the Federation takes some of these ideas that have been mentioned today and implements them, or if they're already implemented, to build them into even greater vehicles for dealing with inequities within the Federation. But more importantly, I hope that all who have been listening and partaking of our discussion, you know, begins that self-examination and takes that self-examination into discussions with other people, particularly people who may not sound like you, look like you, be from the same places as you. There is no, I don't think, any perfect anti-racist. We can surely learn how to be more anti-racist in our thinking and in our thought and the actions that we take. And so that's, I would encourage everyone to take that as a next step.
Steve, would you, before you close out, can you explain to them what is an anti-racist?
So, in borrowing very heavily from Dr. Kennedy's work, you know, the notion of racism is that it's a set of policies and procedures that lead to inequities between the races. An anti-racist is someone whose ideas and thoughts and actions are dealing with dismantling those policies and those practices, and is trying at all times to build equity between the races. That is what is meant by the term anti-racist. So there's no superiority or inferiority in any of the races or genders or on and on and on, just that everyone has equal opportunity.
Thank you.
So kind of breaking down all those systems that we're talking about now, systemic racism and so forth. And so I was thinking, you know, a conversation I've had with other chefs, you know, some things that I think we could do to be more inclusive, you know, because money plays a real good role. I mean, is the cost of membership. So how we have changed, you know, some of the things we've done with membership, making it, going and making it like a monthly payment like you do for like Netflix or something, instead of a big old payment once a year. Talked about, you know, I've talked to other people about team competitions or just individual competitions, you know, how maybe going from a team of 4 to a team of 2 because it's cheaper, it's a little easier on the coaches, whatever, to get people together. That's a possibility. you know, making competitions more like the food people eat in restaurants, you know, or maybe in the region instead of what Escoffier would do, because most African American people won't know who Escoffier is, and yeah, they're going to school, but that's not how they're cooking, and that's not what they're cooking, or that's not what their business is, you know. So I think, and I'm not saying dumbing down anything. You still have a certain level of your competitions for sure, but I think having different styles of competitions is something we can look at that will make it more inclusive, you know, because people don't always cook classics anymore, and if they do, they're taking and putting their own twist on things, whatever, you know. And so I think it makes it more fun. I mean, I know when I first did my competitions, when I was in El Centro, I was like 2 months into my apprenticeship program. Oh, we got a competition in 6 weeks. Like, what's that? A food competition? What do you mean? Hot food shown cold? Well, what is that? You know, because then, you know, aspect everything was all the rage. You know, like, okay, what's that? Well, why would you make hot food cold? And, you know, I'm just like, poof, mind blown. You know, so when you talk to people, and you want to talk about competitions, I think that's one thing, because competitions are a dying breed right now. A lot of people aren't doing it because of the fear factor. Because, like I said, we had to do it when I was at school. It was 3 a year, right? You know, and one was for the school, and then 2 were different purveyors. You know, and I know it's an expense to put on, but if you limit it to a 2-person team or individuals, and you set parameters for it, I think it's doable. But it's work, you know. And a lot of people don't have the time or they want to put the work in, whatever. But I think if you want to reach students, that's one way of doing it. I think when you make it, you know, there's an entry fee, so you make the fee more affordable. And like I said, I'm just thinking about other ways to do it, you know. I don't necessarily think an Escoffier competition of 4 people doing something, you know, and changing the rules and regulations. I can remember pastry chef I worked with, he had the long ponytail, you know, and people used to hound him about his ponytail, you know, but he was best pastry chef, and so what else can you say? You know, he put out quality work, so you deal with the ponytail. He put it up, he pulled it back, whatever, but he got the work done. People used to have the same thing about tattoos. You know, you can't come in my kitchen all tattooed up because that's not my brand, and blah 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 blah. But you know, a lot of young people and old people have tattoos, and so I think once we get past our own little biases, and you can see the work that people are doing and the passion that they have, I think recognizing the person, the individual, I think is key. And how you communicate that to other people, you know, I think is the way to go, you know, moving forward. You know, what does it look like to be inclusive? Well, you put things on a level where people can actually go to it and get there to it. I think cost is an issue. We know people of color and women make less on the dollar than the man does. If my was it equal pay day is 6 months into the next year, and if a person of color or a Hispanic person is 8 months into the next year, be the same thing as what a man makes, a white man makes, you know, for 1990, if a man made $1, then 1991, June, the person of color made that $1, you know, and so forth and so on. So the costs aren't the same. So I think figuring out how we do cost and get that equation out the way. I think figuring out how to make it an open environment so people can feel like they want to talk and can communicate with you, I think is really key. And then I think just having opportunities. Like, I love the mentoring part, cost part, and just putting things on a level where people will be drawn to it. But I think the mentoring and the communication, if you don't draw 2 things, those are 2 things I think that I could definitely work on to make a difference at my level with my platform. So with that, I guess we could close out. And I want to thank you all for taking your time and your suggestions, your ideas coming forward. And thank you. Hopefully this is not the only conversation that we'll have. Hopefully it could be, because everything's going. You know, that would be ideal. But hopefully the conversations and communication continue onward. And like I said, I appreciate and thank you so much for your time, Ashley, Ashten, and Jessie, and Steve, and Lee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chef.
Thank you. Hey, hello everyone. We'll stay connected.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Much
you.
love to all of y'all.